Hi, Zach Reiser here, and welcome back to another Bass Effects review video. I hope you're ready to go back in time to the realm of arcade consoles and lo-fi sounds, because today we are digging in to the Ottobit Jr from Meris. The Ottobit brings a plethora of fun tools to just rip apart and mangle any sound that you send into it. It's a relatively simple pedal on the surface comparatively to many other Meris pedals. It's almost a what you see is what you get type pedal until we get to the sequencer. Now, with that being said, I do want to give a really quick description of the controls just so we're all on the same page. The top row of this pedal is pretty much exactly what it looks like. We have control of sample rate reduction, the filter cutoff, a surprisingly gorgeous filter by the way, and also the bit depth. Going into the bottom row, it's a little less obvious, but the stutter knob is directly connected to the tap tempo or MIDI clock if you're running MIDI, as well as the sequencer knobs. But the stutter here is one of the most musical stutters I've ever encountered, and that's because even in the random setting, it is always taking kind of musical subdivisions of the tap tempo or the MIDI clock that is being sent into it. The sequencer and sequencer mult knobs we're going to get into quite a bit more when we get to the sequencer section, but in general, the sequencer is just how many times your sequence runs. So is it running once, twice, or is it running an infinite times on loop? And then the multiplier knob is one of the coolest things if you really want to get into those like arcade sounds with this pedal, and that's what the relationship is of each sequencer note to the tap tempo. So is it a 1-to-1 relationship? Is it twice the speed of the tap tempo, 4 times the speed, 8 times the speed, etc.? You get it. So without further ado, let's jump right into this thing. My bass is dry tone, as usual, Dingwall ABZ 6-string on the neck pickup. With the knobs in this position, the Ottobit is essentially in its like initialized patch or blank canvas position. It's not doing anything to the incoming audio. So if I turn it on here, you'll hear my dry bass sounds essentially exactly the same. Let's start with just the sample rate. I'm just going to play my dry bass and just kind of go through the different ranges of this knob. Now, as you could hear, once you get beyond about 10 o'clock on the knob, the definition of your pitch starts to get basically unrecognizable because the sample rate is so low. Now, normally I like to wait before I bring in other effects when I'm demoing a pedal, but I find that the Ottobit connected with an octaver is just too good to not show off basically throughout the entire range of all the knobs on this pedal. So I'm going to bring my Boss OC2 in pure wet by itself. It sounds like this. And now I'm just going to show off the range of that sample rate again, but with a really fat subby signal going into it. Moving on to the bits knob. Now, Meris did a pretty unique thing with their bit reduction here, and they added almost this like industrial fuzz element to it. And once you get below about 11 o'clock, you'll hear what I mean. It's just a wall of crazy industrial wash. I do find that on bass, you don't really hear the effect of this knob until you turn it down to at least around 2 or 1 o'clock, and so that's where I'm going to kind of start things off. Let's hear some of that crazy industrial fuzz side of the bit knob with the Boss OC2. Moving on to the filter knob. I will say that this filter kind of shocked me with how good it sounds. Normally when there's a pedal that has a single knob for a filter, I'm kind of expecting it to be pretty meh. But this thing honestly is one of the synthiest filters I've played through, including my Moog MF101. Now, it has no envelope control or anything like that, so the only way you can control it is either manually with the knob or with an expression pedal or via MIDI. Now, the filter knob probably should be shown with the sample rate and the bits, and we're going to get there in a second, but I do want to show it by itself because it is just such a liquid filter. I plugged an expression pedal in, so now I'm controlling the filter cutoff with my foot. Let's hear a little bit of that with a pick with my dry bass. Before adding any sample rate or bit depth reduction to the filter, I want to show just a very pretty kind of harmonically rich texture. So this is a crystals effect from my Eventide H9. By itself, it sounds like this. And now let's run it into the very lush filter on the Meris Ottobit. Now, as I said before, the Ottobit minus the Octaver feature, honestly, is basically a synth-based creator in a box because of how good this filter is, and then combining it with kind of these industrial fuzz-type sounds from the sample rate and the bit reduction. So with the filter fully open, this is the sound that I'm working with right now on my dry bass. But now I want to run my Boss OC2 into that, so this is a pure octaver into that sound. Already very synthy, but now let's play with that filter cutoff with my foot. So one more kind of simple sound here with the filter being controlled by my foot yet again. This is just a little bit of sample rate reduction. And when you don't crank the sample rate way down, it's a very just pretty kind of chimey effect on the top of your note. And I'm going to run that with my dry bass into a very nice lush reverb on the Mercury 7. Moving on to the stutter control. As I said at the beginning, it's a very musical stutter because it's taking subdivisions off of the tempo that you give it. So it's not just random glitches that are happening. So if I tap into tempo, and now I turn on the stutter knob, you'll hear that the stutters that happen are going to be musically related to that 1, 2, 3, 4 tempo. Different ranges on the stutter knob will give you different kinds of subdivisions and sometimes different pitches as well based on where you are. So that first one was basically just eighth notes, but if I crank it to noon, let's hear what that sounds like. So that one is quite different than the first one that I showed, but you will notice that they are repetitive in the sense that the stutter is predictable. But if we turn the stutter to random, it's what it sounds like. It's going to be random subdivisions, pitches, etc., but still all based on that tempo, which is why it stays musical. Now, to really show what this is doing in terms of the musicality of what's going on, I want to take a really simple bass line. I'll show you what that sounds like by itself, and then I'm going to run the same bass line into this randomized stutter. Let's add some fat octaver instead of my dry bass, same bass line though, into this randomized stutter. And then let's make this way nastier by rolling back the sample rate and maybe adding some filtering as well. So we are finally to the sequencer in the Ottobit. Now this is a 6-step sequencer. You can cut steps out, so it could be a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5-step sequencer as well. And you also can mute steps or pass over them along the way. We're going to start with a pitch-based sequence because it's the easiest to kind of immediately hear what's going on. And all you do to set the step of the sequence is hold down the Alt knob and then turn the corresponding knob for each step in the sequence. So I have dialed in my little sequence here, and I have it on an infinite loop, so it's just going to keep going as long as my note is held down. Now, at 1 times on the mult, it's a little bit of just kind of a boring sounding thing. This is what it sounds like with 1 time on. However, if we kick this up to 2 times, we get into much more of your traditional kind of arpeggiated sound you'd get on a synthesizer. Let's get a little bit synthier with this. I'm going to run my Boss OC2 Pure Wet into this same pitch sequence, except I'm going to alter the sample rate and the bit depth a little bit. Let's hear what that sounds like. The sequencer actually has 3 separate modes. You can sequence the pitch, which is what you've been hearing so far, or you can sequence the filter cutoff or the sample rate. So let's hear what all of those sound like here. So I am going to turn on a little bit of sample rate reduction because it makes it easier to hear the filter sequencer when it happens. One thing I love to do with any time-based effect, whether it's a delay, a tremolo, or something like this, a sequencer, is to kind of lock them together. So I have a tremolo from my Eventide H9 that sounds like this by itself. And now I've tapped in the same tempo on that sample rate sequencer. And let's hear what it sounds like running that tremolo into this sample rate sequencer. switching the sequencer over to finally the filter version of the sequencer. I'm running my Boss OC2 again into the Ottobit, and I got a pretty good amount of sample rate and bit depth going on here, so you can really hear that filter cutoff pinging around. So we're going to stretch out into kind of synth arpeggio land here for my last sound sample. This is going to be taking a diatonic arpeggiated delay from my Eventide H9 tuned to the key of D minor. That by itself sounds like this. And I'm going to be running that into the Ottobit, and I'm controlling the sample rate and the filter cutoff with my foot, rolling them both back together at the same time. And then I'm going to take all of that and run it into, yet again, the lovely Meris Mercury 7 Reverb. That is my demo of the Ottobit Jr from Meris. If you're looking to destroy, manipulate, mangle your incoming audio signal, then look no further. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, share, and all of that good stuff. It really does help me out. I will be back very shortly with more pedals and effects review videos as well as some performance videos. Thank you so much for watching.